Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Wednesday, the 24th of February, um, this Wednesday in the first week of Lent. This is Church at Home with Rachael. I hope you're having a really good week, a good first week of Lent. I know that this can be a really heavy season, especially considering the season of Lent we seem to have had since last year. Today, I'm talking about prayer. Monday, we talked about self-examination. Tuesday, we talked about penitence. Today, I'd like to talk to you about prayer. And as you know, prayer is a huge thing for me in my life. So why is prayer so important in the season of Lent? Why would we focus on prayer? I think because Lent is a time of sort of a breaking away. It's a time that we sort of universally seem to still accept that it's a time of kind of dampening down, which seems kind of contrary to the days are getting longer. Spring is coming and it's in the air. You can't really see it here yet, and it might be a while off, but we know it's coming, and that makes a big difference. We're heading toward, in a few weeks, the changing the time again, which will give us longer days as well. So, but there's something about Lent that seems kind of like it's dampened down, like kind of heavy. Maybe it's because winter seems so long and we're ready to be done with it, and it just seems the snow is still here and it's plodding along and plodding along. That this season seems kind of dark and dreary. When we think about Easter, it's easy to think about tulips and daffodils and flowers and furry little bunnies and bright, happy things. Christmas is crisp, clean snow and Santa Claus and angels and children laughing and opening presents. But Lent is that season when it's like, yeah, really? Okay, we're still here? Yeah, we got to do this. So I think really Lent is important because it's a season of our life that we live, whether we're Christian or not. I think people have Lenten seasons. Throughout their lives, they have the highs and lows, the ups and downs. But I think every person who is able to reflect on their own lives and look back on them can recognize there have been seasons, some shorter, some longer, when it feels like nothing's ever going to be okay again. When it just feels like everything is going on and on and on, and nothing good is coming of it, and when is it ever going to end? And so I think that's why Lent really resonates with people, not necessarily in a great happy way, and that's okay. It's okay that we have those seasons when we recognize that things are tough. We are not a people who go around looking at the sunny side of life all the time. We may do that sometimes. We may indeed be those Pollyannas. I tend to be one of them, who think that everything's going to work out. But the reality is, as adults, we know that there are going to be times when the working out is going to take time. And so we need these times, this 6 weeks of it's still not long, beautiful days. It's still cold and dark and damp and miserable. And that sort of reflects our souls, and that's okay. So prayer is such an important part of that season of Lent. It should be a part of every day of the Christian life. But in Lent, we take time to really think about that. So what is prayer to you? When I say the word prayer, what do you think? Please feel free to comment and tell me, because I love to hear that. I'm learning every day and learning from you, and that's important. So what do you think prayer is? For me, I think first and foremost, prayer is that a dialogue with God. A priest I knew when I was in seminary, he was the priest, an indigenous priest at the Six Nations, and he was chaplain to the Chapel of Mohawk at the Six Nations, First Nations place near Brantford, Ontario. He's now, I don't know where he is now, but he came here, to Alberta. I think he was in Calgary for a while. And he spoke to his student one day and told her that for him, prayer is an ongoing conversation with God, which means for him, he prayed all the time. Every waking moment of his day, he was praying, because everything he did was in a relationship. It was a conversation with God. Whether it was something as big as going to the bedside of someone who was dying and saying prayers for the end of life, praying for someone who called and said, something wonderful's happened, can you say a prayer of thanksgiving? Or even prayers as he sat and drank his coffee in the morning, or spoke to his wife about what their day would be. His whole day was infused with prayer, because his whole day was infused with knowing that God was with him, that his relationship with Jesus Christ was almost like he was a Siamese twin, that Jesus was with him all of the time, wherever he went, whatever he did. And so everything he did, everything he thought, everything he said was a part of that prayer. At first, I thought that was kind of like, okay, yeah, that's really like holier than thou, and how can that possibly happen? Until I began to realize that he wasn't saying that everything he did was wonderful and cool and perfect in God's eyes. What he was saying is that his relationship with God, with his relationship with Jesus Christ, through this ongoing dialogue throughout the day, meant that God, Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit were all privy to those things that were darker within him, those thoughts that he had that weren't so great. As soon as he said them, as soon as he thought them, he knew that God knew them too, and he'd have to take time to repent. He'd have to take time to self-examine and say, okay, what have I done? What am I thinking? Excuse me. How might I change that? This priest was such a gentle person. He was a gentleman in the perfect sense of the word. And I think the reason for that is because he'd been living this way for so very long. He was only probably about 38 or 39 at the time, but he had an old soul. It's like he had lived this way for generations. Because he lived this way, and because he was so aware through his prayer life with God, this ongoing dialogue with God, he was so quickly aware of the things that he was thinking that were wrong, the things that he was doing that were wrong. He was able to fix them quickly until they got too far out of hand. He certainly didn't live a perfect life, and he had a temper just like everybody else, and he had his own demons he had to deal with. But for the most part, he really did live with the integrity of knowing that the prayer life that he had, this ongoing relationship with God, every moment of every day was what kept him balanced. So for me, that's a good starting place to understand what prayer is. Prayer is the ongoing conversation I have with God throughout my day, every day. Okay, so that's like the foundation. The next layer for me is the prayers, the actual stopping what I'm doing. Sometimes I close my eyes, sometimes I don't. If I'm driving, I certainly don't, but sometimes I do, because closing my eyes cuts out the distractions of what I'm seeing, the things that will take my focus away from what I'm about to say or what I'm about to hear. So often, when able, I close my eyes to pray. And in that taking of that moment to just sit and say, okay, God, here it is. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm worried about. This is what I need. This is what someone else needs. Please hear my prayer. And then I listen. What is God saying to me in the silence? What is God saying to me and the people that then speak to me after I've prayed that prayer, what I read or what I see or what I witness after I've said that prayer, because God speaks in all of these things. That's like the second level of prayer. And then there's a level of prayer that's more disciplined for me, and it involves taking set time away. So I said before, every morning I get down on my elliptical and I walk on the elliptical and I have my shower and I start my first pot of coffee. And then I take about an hour and a half or 2 hours and I just sit in silence. The first thing I do is take about 5 minutes and I say, "Good morning, Jesus, welcome to my day." And then I sit. Now, ideally, in that silence, I would just be blank. I would just be listening. But I have a million things running through my head. And when I realize they're running, I invite them to just leave, to go away for a while. After I've done that, I pull out my prayer book, the book that I've written that has the names of every person every week that I'm praying for. From our parish cycle of prayer, people who've asked for prayer, all of my family members, other things in the world, people, praying for the bishop as she prepares to end her Episcopal ministry, praying for all those people who will be allowing their names to stand for possible election to become a bishop because of the impact that will have on their lives, their families, their current parishes. All those things. I use that prayer and I go through, and it's not rigid. Sometimes I add things. Not often do I take things out because there's a reason why I've written them in each week. And then I move on to saying the daily office from the Book of Alternative Services. And I do the readings for the day, and I use the prayers, and I let myself be centered in something that I know that so many people around the world are doing, maybe even at that moment. And then I use some devotions because they kickstart my brain. They make me think of something from a different perspective. And then I take some more time in silence. And then I try to read about 10 minutes each or more if I can of a couple of books. One of them being something, older, like the Desert Fathers or the Prayers of St. Francis of Assisi, or right now I'm reading The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. And I also try to read something a little bit more up to date. Right now, some Lenten books and things like that. But that for me is prayer. It takes a lot of time for me, but if I don't take that time during the morning, I find the rest of my day goes sideways. And that's not just my Lenten discipline, it's a discipline I have every day. So I'm not encouraging you to take up 2 hours of prayer unless you want to and have the time that you can legitimately do that. But I am inviting you to take some time, separate from what you usually do, to pray each day during Lent. Take time to examine your own self, your own mind, body, and soul. Take time to be penitent for those things that you have done that you should not have done, those things that you did not do that you should have done. And take some time to pray. Allow God to continue that dialogue with you that starts as soon as you wake up in the morning, whether you realize it or not. Take some time to pray. I encourage you to have a great day. Stay home and stay safe. If you have to go out, wear your mask. And have a good day. And I will see you again tomorrow when we'll continue to talk about our Lenten disciplines on Church at Home with Rachael for Thursday. God bless everybody.